Hey, you're listening to a Bible Brodown podcast, a member of the Trinity Commission. This is where brothers come together to sharpen one another so we can rightly divide the Word of God. I'm Matt.
And this is Billy.
For the Minicast, as promised on Monday, we're going to talk about the genre of James. Not super in-depth, but just kind of have a conversation because it relates to James 2 and how you interpret it, and our episode from last week where the idea is that some people think that salvation or the judgment talked about, or sozo, the salvation in James 2 is not about eternal life. And sometimes they argue based on the genre of James. So, yeah.
First of all, does genre matter, how we interpret things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take the Gospels, for instance. I think originally, for a while, they were considered to be historical. Now it is more the consensus that they are Greco-Roman biography. The difference is that when you think about a historical book, you think about things happening in a specific time, in a specific order, and there's no embellishments, there's no summarizations, there's nothing like that. It is very sterile or procedural, right?
Right.
History is history. In a Greco-Roman biography, it's written differently. The genre of it means that there are certain liberties that they're allowed to take, but it was understood to be that way in that time. The point was to emphasize a certain aspect of the character of the person that you're talking about. And so the correct understanding of that particular genre, very important. Same with wisdom literature or prophecy. Revelation is prophecy. Nobody thinks that some people might think that there's an actual dragon that's going to chase a lady through a desert. I don't think that's the case.
What?
Billy is the only one who thinks that there's an actual dragon. Understanding the genre helps us understand the correct way to interpret it. And people throw around, you don't take the Bible literally. I mean, according to genre, take it the way it's supposed to.
Right. What's interesting, so if you go to like Bible Gateway, you can search for a specific word and you can like tailor it to what you want, like Old Testament, New Testament, Deuteronomical books, books of Moses, wisdom books. And you know how many books it classifies as wisdom? A whole lot.
Hold on. Let me see if let me guess. Does it start with Nehemiah? I don't think it does. I think that's the end of it.
It goes way more than that.
Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon.
Maybe it's just wrong because it's not. You put in like something and it'll look up pretty much almost every book.
Yeah. You could throw in the Deuterocanonicals and be like Ecclesiasticus and some of the other
right.
We don't have in our Bible.
Right.
But wisdom literature. Job is seen as, I think, it's the most popular understanding of it as being kind of New Testament wisdom literature that reflects not only Old Testament wisdom literature, but also apparently there's another style. The style is very similar to both Jewish wisdom and Greek and Roman moral itinerant teachers, like the Stoics. The style reflects both. And some of the ways that it reflects it are the loose structure. He really does tend to jump from one subject to another just within a single thought.
Right.
He'll bounce back and forth.
Same thing with like Proverbs and Psalms.
Many imperatives. He's constantly telling you to do something, act in this way, be this way, or put aside something. And then diatribes, where there's a supposed objector asking a question, or in the case of 2:18, that area, it is a second person asking a third person a question. So that'd be that diatribe.
Yeah, you think wisdom is often like factual knowledge, less factual knowledge and more skill, like how to, right? More know how than know that. Paul does a lot of like doctrine, right? So we would not, in the book of Romans, we talked about how the last 4-5 chapters, he changes
12 through 16.
Yeah, he changes from, doctrine to like how to live.
Ecclesiology. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
How to relate to one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of, it tends to be ethical instruction in books of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like know how instead of know that.
So A couple of different directions I want to go. Does wisdom literature, does James being wisdom literature, and I'm not disagreeing with it, but does that preclude James from speaking about theological matters?
No. I mean, even in the books, traditional books of wisdom of the Old Testament, you can still find theology in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a paper on James as New Testament wisdom literature by Gary Holloway, and just some interesting things he talks about. James, how it pertains to Leviticus. Like James 2:1, Leviticus 19:15, James 2:8, Leviticus 19:18, James 2:9, Leviticus 19:15, James 4:11, Leviticus 19:16, James 5:4.
I believe, doesn't that's the one I was thinking of. Doesn't that article have like subtitles or categories of things that it's talking about? Not just lining up the verses, but
patience.
Rattle off some of those. Yeah.
Wisdom, doubt, trials, temptation, hearing, rich and poor, mercy, brevity of life, rusting of money, killing of righteous, prayer for the sick. Yeah.
If I were to ask you, I'm not asking you to do it, but just we trust you. If I were to ask you to try and rattle off different places where Paul or Jesus or Peter talked about all of those same things, you think you could do it?
Yeah.
Not too hard.
Right.
Like I thought it was interesting saying, yeah, James is definitely wisdom literature, and here's all these ways that it lines up with Leviticus. Like you could pull those concepts, that wisdom out of any epistle.
Yeah, and what's interesting, when Steve Gray goes through the book of James in his because he has the whole book of the Bible, right? And when he goes through James, he says James, like his entire 5 chapters, he says, I forgot, like it was in the teens or 20s, about the parallel to the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Several places just off the top of my head where he pulls from that. The peacemaking at the end of chapter 3. Yep.
Like parallel after parallel on the Sermon on the Mount, which would be very much wisdom, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit and all that stuff.
And I wonder if he wrote that way. I'm curious. I don't know the answer.
Oh yeah, this guy does that too. Topic in James, Sermon on the Mount, trials, and he has trials, asking, riches, God's gifts, listening, judging, faith and works, the tongue, all these things, and he cites the Sermon on the Mount. So he does the same thing.
And which obviously is wisdom directly from God. So it's a good one to base your sermon off of, for sure, or your letter in this case. I just think the idea that yes, there is wisdom in it, and yes, it is structured as those old wisdom books were, doesn't preclude us from also seeing soteriological points. He pretty clearly makes them, we think, in chapters 1 and 2, but that is in and amongst his advice to the congregation on how to live, on how to be beneficial to one another, on how to use your gifts and be peacemakers and not cause division, things like that. So,
yeah, it's funny. You think about the people in history, the theologians in history, and how many of them wanted to take James out, right? And you think about the style of people they were, and they were doctrinal people. They
were very systematic thinkers.
Right, and you see that dichotomy, or that almost competition, like all throughout the ages. It's we see it. I hear it all the time. Like, oh, you should do less studying and more like be out there and giving to the poor, and you know what I mean? You see that all the time. Like, why are you guys always on Facebook, or why do you always discuss these things when you should be out, showing the love of God to people?
Yeah, as if there aren't many different parts of the body with many different jobs.
Right.
We should all do this one thing.
Right.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, and it's there's balance for all things, right? In order to know how to go out and do those things, you have to understand who God is and what He expects of you. There's definitely a balance on living your life and learning and living. I guess that's a good way to put it.
And again, I think every single New Testament writer emphasize that at some point. Outside of the gospel, the Gospels have a specific focus. They're talking about Jesus, and you hear that wisdom from Jesus through the gospel writers. But when you get into from really Romans onward, they all bring that up in one way or another.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like Corinthians, they're the entire 2 letters are all about, hey,
Correcting
church,
their
quit
behavior.
doing this stuff, do that
Right.
stuff. You know, like it's
Right.
and within it is a bunch of wisdom. But he also sneaks in things that clearly explain what the gospel is and how one is saved.
Mm-hmm.
So I just that was the point that I wanted to bring out was it may be wisdom, but wisdom is all over the New Testament, and in no way does that stop us from seeing how one is saved in the early chapters of James.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can. I mean, I could find you salvific passages all throughout the Old Testament wisdom books. All
We've
throughout.
done it. Yeah, we've done it.
Yeah.
So
Psalm 19.
cool. Psalm 19 is a great one.
Yes, I reposted that recently to our Facebook group. For those of you who are unaware, we have a Facebook group. It's a private group that you can go out and join. We have almost 1,000 members and have some really good discussions there. It's very open. We've not ever had to do much moderating in fights and people calling each other heretics and stuff like that. We seem to draw people who have some maturity in that aspect, which is good. But where was I going about the website, about the Facebook group? Oh,
we got to thank the members of the group for that, though, because once they get in there, even people who have had hard times in other groups will come to our group and go, you have something, they've told us this, and we're not patting our own back, you have something special going on in this group, and we want to preserve it. And they won't even invite some of their friends that they know are going to come in and pick fights, which is fantastic.
But yeah, just this week I reposted episode 72, which is Psalm 19, and going through that entire chapter. That's something that we did, I think, 2 years ago. And
around Romans 10.
Yeah, right between when we were doing Romans 10. And wisdom comes, we were teaching doctrine, but there's so much wisdom within all of that. It's just, everywhere you see doctrine and wisdom because they're mixed. You have to have wisdom in order to know how to live. You have to have doctrine in order to understand, how to live.
Yeah. Can you set your mind on the Spirit and not receive wisdom?
Right.
Can you pursue God and in all your ways acknowledge Him and let Him direct your paths and even a little bit and not grow in wisdom?
Yeah, you're supposed to follow the Spirit, right? Walk by the Spirit, right? So the Spirit is, He's the Spirit of truth. So you're learning something from the Spirit of truth, and you're learning how to live.
Mm-hmm.
They're interconnected.
Yeah, because it points back to loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Cool,
what does it mean to love God? You have to understand what that means in order to express, in order to imago Dei, image back.
Yeah. Who is God? You have to know who He is.
Yeah.
In order to. Yep. All right. Cool. BibleBrodown@gmail.com if you want to shoot us a question or whatever. We also have YouTube videos if you want to see those and see our face. We're over there. We're not monetized or anything, so pick your favorite platform and knock yourself out. We don't care. But
yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Nope. That's it.
Cool. Next week we'll see you. God bless.
God bless.